Most people think power comes from war, from armies, from blood spilled and enemies defeated. But what if I told you the greatest empire builder of his time never swung a sword in battle? He didn't conquer lands by force, he conquered hearts by strategy. This is the story of a man who mastered the art of influence, a man whose wisdom brought him global fame, and whose downfall came not from enemies outside, but from desires within. This is the story of a king, a man known not just for his wisdom, but for how he used it. His name was Solomon. But don't let the ancient setting fool you. This isn't just a story about a king. This is a blueprint for how to build peace, prosperity, and power, not through destruction, but through connection. Let me take you there. Imagine the ancient world, nations rising and falling, kingdoms constantly at war, every neighbor a threat, every alliance uncertain. Most kings fought to expand their territory. Most believed victory came from the tip of a spear. But Solomon, he saw the world differently. He asked a question that changed the course of his reign. What if I could build an empire without fighting a single war? What if the true path to greatness was not domination, but diplomacy? And so, Solomon did something unprecedented. He started marrying his enemies. No, not out of love, out of strategy. When he became king, he made a bold move. He married the daughter of the Egyptian pharaoh. Now pause for a moment. This wasn't just any royal marriage. Egypt was a superpower. The Egyptians didn't give their daughters to foreign kings. That was a privilege reserved for equals, or more often, vassals. But Solomon had built a reputation. His father was King David, warrior, poet, legend. And Solomon, he was known for something even rarer, wisdom beyond his years. When Pharaoh gave his daughter's hand in marriage, it sent a message to the world. Israel is no longer a small desert tribe. It is now a player in the global arena. But that was just the beginning. Solomon didn't stop at Egypt. He went on to marry women from all the surrounding nations: Moab, Ammon, Edom, Sidon, the Hittites. Each marriage was a silent treaty, a handshake with a crown, a peace pact sealed not in ink, but in intimacy. And it worked. While other kings spilled blood on battlefields, Solomon expanded his influence in bedrooms and banquet halls. He built a web of alliances that made war unthinkable. Because who wants to wage war against their son-in-law? Now I know what you're thinking. Doesn't that sound manipulative? But pause for a moment. How often do we try to achieve our goals by force? In relationships, in business, in life? We push, we demand, we dominate. But Solomon shows us another way. He teaches us that real power isn't always loud. It isn't about raising your voice. Sometimes it's about raising your value. And that's what he did. Solomon made himself invaluable. He didn't beg for alliances. He became the kind of man people wanted to be aligned with. That's the first lesson. Become valuable, and power will find you. Under Solomon's rule, his kingdom flourished. Trade routes opened, gold flowed into the city, architecture boomed. He built temples and palaces that made visitors gasp. And through it all, there was peace. Not because his army was the strongest, but because his relationships were the deepest. You see, Solomon understood something we often forget in our rush to succeed. You don't need to burn bridges to build empires. His fame grew beyond the borders of Israel. Stories of his wisdom, wealth, and prosperity traveled across deserts and seas. And one day that story reached the ears of a queen, a powerful, mysterious woman who ruled a distant land in the south, a land of spice and gold, a place called Sheba. The Queen of Sheba had heard the legends. She had heard of this king who could settle disputes with a word, who built temples inlaid with gold, who had peace where others had chaos. But she didn't just believe the rumors. She came to see for herself, with a caravan loaded with riches, gold, spices, precious stones. She made the long journey to Jerusalem, not to impress Solomon, but to test him. And test him she did. She posed riddles, asked hard questions, challenged his intellect. And Solomon, he answered them all. Every question, every challenge, met not with pride, but with clarity, with wisdom so disarming it made her rethink everything she thought she knew. And when she saw his palace, his court, his servants, the offerings at his temple, she was overwhelmed. Not by the wealth, but by the order, the purpose, the peace. She said, "What I heard in my own land was true, but not even half the story was told." And in that moment, Solomon achieved something no warrior ever could. He won the heart of a queen without a single battle. History doesn't tell us exactly what happened next, but whispers suggest that what started as diplomacy turned into something deeper. A connection, perhaps even a romance. Some say they had a son. Others say she returned home transformed. But what's certain is this: Solomon's influence reached farther than armies ever could. Because when you lead with wisdom, you don't just change policies, you change people. But here's where the story takes a turn. Because sometimes the very thing that builds your kingdom is also what cracks its foundation. You see, Solomon didn't just marry for politics. Over time, his strategy turned into excess. 700 wives, 300 concubines, 1,000 women, each with their own culture, customs, and gods. At first, it was manageable, but slowly, gradually, things began to shift. These weren't just alliances anymore. These women came with their own identities, their own expectations. They wanted to worship their gods, build their temples, practice their traditions, and Solomon let them. He began to compromise, little by little, until the man who once stood for wisdom and clarity became blurred by the very relationships that once made him great. There's a truth here that's hard to swallow. The same door that opens opportunity can also invite distraction. Solomon's marriages brought peace, yes, but they also brought 1,000 competing voices into his inner world. And when you let too many influences into your life, it becomes harder to hear your own. He started building shrines for foreign gods, not because he believed in them, but because he didn't want to upset the people he cared about. Sound familiar? How many of us abandon our values, not out of malice, but out of the fear of disappointing others? How often do we stay silent when we should speak? Because we don't want to rock the boat. Solomon's story is not just a triumph, it's a warning. Be careful that your strategy doesn't become your seduction. But let's not stop there. Because even in his downfall, Solomon teaches us something profound. Despite his compromises, despite his mistakes, he left behind a legacy that shaped history. Why? Because he dared to lead differently. He dared to choose wisdom over war. He dared to believe that diplomacy could be more powerful than domination. He proved that peace is not the absence of conflict, but the presence of understanding. So what does this mean for you? Maybe you're not a king. Maybe you don't have armies or palaces, but you do have influence. You do have relationships. You do face battles, maybe not with swords, but with silence, with stress, with uncertainty. And in those moments, you have a choice. You can push harder, or you can think deeper. You can fight, or you can build alliances. You can dominate, or you can connect. Solomon teaches us that wisdom is power, that connection is currency, that peace is a strategy, not a reward. And maybe that's the most powerful message of all. You don't have to conquer the world by fighting it. You can conquer it by understanding it. You can build your empire by building trust. You can achieve greatness not through aggression, but through alignment. But you must stay vigilant, because even the wisest among us can lose their way if we forget why we started in the first place. So here's the takeaway. Don't chase power, cultivate wisdom. Don't burn bridges, build connections. Don't sacrifice your soul for your strategy. Be like Solomon in his rise, strategic, insightful, intentional. And learn from Solomon in his fall. Stay grounded, stay focused, stay true. Because in the end, the greatest empires are not built with bricks and stones, but with people and principles. So the next time you face a challenge, ask yourself, not how do I win this fight, but how do I avoid it altogether? Not how do I overpower them, but how do I understand them? Not how do I get ahead, but how do I bring others with me? That is real leadership. That is real influence. That is how you build a kingdom that lasts. And maybe, just maybe, that's how you change the world. Let us know in the comments section below what you are willing to give in exchange for a kingdom. Please like this video and subscribe to this channel for more inspiring stories.